We're back for part two of decision making. In the first part, we defined decision making and its place in the policy process. We also looked at the rational comprehensive model of decision making. In this set of slides, we build off that rational comprehensive approach with bounded rationality and incrementalism. Let's dig into it. Bounded rationality begins with this notion that goals and tools are intertwined. Right? Means cannot be separated from values. When we discussed the rational comprehensive model, we said that we consider these things individually. So you come to a decision and you think about the goals, right? You decide exactly what the goal is separately from considering the tool. So decide the goal for the policy, right? And then, in a second stage, consider what tool is appropriate. Right? This is separating the means from the ends, or the ends, the goals, from the means, the tools, right? Additionally, in the rational comprehensive approach, values are excluded in the decision-making process, right? Everything is based on facts. In the bounded rationality approach, we consider values and facts and that they are interconnected. If you think about public policies being made for the public in a political environment, what is politics but the allocation of values? So they cannot be excluded when it comes to our decision-making in this type of, in these circumstances. So the definition of a good policy from this perspective is one where consensus can be reached among stakeholders. Stakeholders are those who have a stake in the policy or are impacted by in some way or connected to the policy, right? And so those participants agree that, okay, this decision, right, this goal, this tool is good. Key principles here in bounded rationality approach. The actors is going to choose the first option that meets the minimum criteria. And they make the most rational decision with the information available. We've already gotten rid of two of those features that make rational comprehensive approaches difficult, right? We're choosing the first option that meets the minimum criteria of the goal, right? So you are immediately cutting down on the amount of time that you have to invest in the decision making. And you're just doing it with the information that you have, knowing that it may not be perfect. And the goal is to achieve satisfactory rather than maximum social gain. And you recognize that further search, further seeking of information, further time invested has costs. So here is a case and how we can respond. And I'll let you read this for a second. So here you go. You have the situation. You have a limited budget, you have incomplete data, and you have a lot of competing interests. And so what do? You review a few alternatives and set a minimum criteria and select the first one that gets there. Building off of this bounded rationality approach is incrementalism. Herbert Simon kind of wrote this paper on bounded rationality and said that, okay, the economic models are fine, but we need to recognize that they are imperfect. Building off of that idea means that, okay, we have limited processing capacity. We need to make some sort of progress in given areas. So we're going to make small changes, and we're going to reduce risk by making those changes kind of incrementally, meaning that we can make adjustments. Within this process, we have this kind of notion of successive limited comparisons. So we're comparing a series of alternative policies, right, to the status quo. And we're choosing the one that is the least different. The benefits here, it simplifies the decision-making process. So already recognizing that we are bounded actors, right? We are bounded by time, by energy, by cognitive ability, by our understanding of a problem, right? We don't want to really make a decision that's going to totally ruin things or totally mess things up. And so we want to make just the minimum change, right? So we're going to reduce the number of alternatives that we have to consider from this kind of incremental approach. We're going to focus on just small marginal changes and then allow feedback. And then because you didn't make too much of a change, you can adjust it. and the idea that we are managing risk. Lindblom called this, in his model that built off of Herbert Simon's bounded rationality, muddling through. Right? We are just kind of muddling through the process of small changes, dealing with situations as they come. It's not always appropriate, right? It wouldn't work for mood shots or kind of major innovations, managing pandemics, addressing major recessions or depressions. Some things are too complex for incremental solutions. So while incrementalism is pretty much the way the system works for the most part, we make small changes, never really have huge policy changes for a number of different reasons. In some cases, this doesn't work. We do need kind of a major response to some things. And here's an example, right? Environmental regulation. You have the emission standards, environmental group goal standards, and then these kind of incremental steps, right? You're not making a huge leap of reduction in parts per million immediately in year one. No, you're stacking it up over time. So here's a kind of summary of the three models we talked about: rational choice, complete and perfect information, bounded rationality, limited information. So you make the choice that is the most satisfactory, where you can reach consensus. And incrementalism. Because you're making choices with limited information, you don't want to mess things up too much. You're risk adverse. And so we make small changes, just a bit different from the status quo, in a serial process, meaning that we can make changes over time. When to use each model? Rational choice, when you have good information and you have time. Bounded rationality, when you need consensus, when time is limited, when information is limited. And incrementalism, when only small changes need to be done, or only small changes are politically feasible. Bounded rationality recognizes that humans have cognitive limitations. We talked about the difference between optimizing in the rational comprehensive approach, coming up with the optimal solution, and the bounded rationality approach, we satisfies, or the most satisfactory and sufficient solution. And that can often be more practical. And incrementalism is going to reduce risk. Different situations may call for different approaches. That's it for these kind of three policies that build off of each other, or three approaches to decision making that build off of each other. We're going to turn to kind of a different perspective in the third slide set on decision making. So I'll see you then.